have to cry before we do all we can. If sending your love is all you can give to help one live, how many times can we turn our heads and pretend we cannot see? Hey, everybody. Welcome to Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today as we dedicate the show to all of the victims of the attacks, September 11th, 2001, 20 years ago. It's hard to believe. Where were you when that happened? And what about the families? How have they endured? How have they survived? What about so many people who have been sickened and who died after the attacks? The frontline workers, the volunteers, in the thousands in the South, in the thousands, they've had to fight for a compensation fund. They have had to fight to get health care because of the asbestos that was released in the air. So many people, and the glass and the fiberglass, and oh my goodness, so many of the toxins that were released in the air. Even people who just lived in the New York City area were deeply impacted by this. We pray for all of our fellow human beings today as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the attacks of September 11th, 2001, 20 years ago. And we take a special dedication for those of us in the Chicago area and those of you who are familiar with the WGN Superstation. Not too long ago, it was very, very difficult to find African Americans, to find Black people anchoring major newscasts. Allison Payne was one of those persons. She made her transition at the tender age of 57. Sister beloved, and a bright shining light. 9-time Emmy winner. We love you, Allison, and glad she has taken flight with the angels, her father and mother. God bless you, Allison Payne. So let's get right to it, everybody. Uh, what about Texas? What about Roe v. Wade? What about the abortion ban? What about voting rights? What's going on in Texas? Indeed, we want to hear from you here on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Call us at 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. And let's talk about Texas today. The fight for voting rights, the attack on voting rights, the attack on reproductive rights. What does that mean? Um, and what does that portend for the rest of the country? Who will be advantaged politically in the 2022 midterms, Democrats or Republicans? As we're seeing more and more states push for outright bans on reproductive rights for women, as we're seeing more and more states push for really reduced access to the vote. So, what's going on in the United States? I want to hear from you. 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Hey, Dave. Hey, Jewel. Hey, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. And Gloria from Rockville. Hey, Maryland, just outside of D.C. Howard University in the house, kind of, sort of. And University of Maryland and Morgan State and everybody. We love it. We love it. We love us. Love it. We're streaming live on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page. Go to Facebook and check us out there, and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're also on my answer Reverend Jackson's Twitter poll question. Uh, who will be helped most by Texas's rollbacks on voting and reproductive rights? Democrats or Republicans, or do you not know? It's a mixed bag that you're coming back with. 37% said Democrats will be helped. 40% say it's the Republicans, and 23% just say, I don't know. So let you tell us what's happening. What happens when reproductive rights are rolled back? Black women are impacted disproportionately. Maternal mortality goes up. There's so much that goes into this. And we want to hear your thoughts. Go to Reverend Jackson's Twitter feed, at Rev J Jackson, and weigh in on that. Please weigh in, weigh in, weigh in. And hey, everybody, Willie and Carmelita and Dawn and Angela and Linda and Vanderlei down there in Brazil, my brother down there, and Jewel and Shirley and Dave, everybody like and share. Please like and share this broadcast. We've got a lot of people going to tell us what's going on, their thoughts, led by, of course, Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett, who's going to help us to see what is going on down there in Texas. Back with more of Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes. I'm Santita Jackson. Stay right there. Showing the love that is in our hearts, let us bring salvation back.
CK, then I picked
Okay, you can try.
Jonathan, then I picked
Okay, you just keep trying then, please. Dave Daly?
Good morning.
Hey, Texas State Representative Crockett. Is she there? Representative Crockett?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are pulling everybody up as we speak. Okay, thank you, thank you. Thanks for being here. Just trying to get some of these moving parts here. Oh, so I hope you all had a wonderful night. I hope you got a little rest, Representative Crockett.
Just a little.
I know. That's just, I think that is, honey, I think that's how it works. Now, when we were kids, we remember when they used to make you take a nap. Now I'm like, oh, I wish someone would give me the space just to take a little nap in the middle of the day.
Absolutely.
Whew, it's a lot. Ooh, ooh, it's too much. Well, you're on with David Daly. Of course, he wrote the New York Times bestseller Rat Act. We can't say that on the air. Oh, why your vote doesn't count. It really outlines it. Well, why don't you give her a synopsis? Because he has a new book out, Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. Could you give her a synopsis of what, let's just start with Rat Act, David, before we go on air.
Sure. It's really the story of the last redistricting cycle and how Republicans launched a really sophisticated, careful strategy to win back state legislatures around the country and then remap in Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and what the consequences have been, which is not been good.
CK can't do it today.
The first hand down there in Texas.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at, oh, I'm sorry. No, you all keep talking. I'm sorry. I'm trying to, I'm producing. Okay. But it's, Representative Crockett, it's a great book. You really.
Yeah, I have to look into it.
It's everything. These people, my father often says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And you see how those in power play the long game. Particularly these Republicans, they play the long game. They're like, take the presidency. I don't care about that. I'm going to lock up the state legislatures. I'm going to lock up the lower house of Congress. I'm going to lock this thing up. I mean, they do it. And then they systematically, they're just systematic. And I'm like, I just try to I look at the Democrats and go, what are you doing? What is this? Just, oh, it's too much. And then you flying between cities trying to figure it out. Yeah, you need to get on that Democratic Party so they can go on and do what needs to be done. Because what they're doing right now is not. They're not pushing the way you need them to push. The GOP, they release these activists on the ground and they pay them. They do that. Whenever you see a lot of money, the Republicans are involved.
Absolutely.
You know it. I'm not mad at them. I'm just saying that's how they play that long game. So it's too much. So I'm going to come right to you all. Who do we have? Is that Jonathan? Yeah. Okay. Is he going to call? Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I'll text you the number.
When you're down in trouble, you need some love and care. Ain't
Welcome back. Welcome back to Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. I want to hear your voices today. 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. What do you make of the rollback on voting and reproductive rights in Texas? It is happening all over the country. What do you think about that? How does that how will that impact how we live? How will it impact our party, our partisan politics, our ideological politics? What is going on in Texas? What is going on? We've got David Daly, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Rat Aft, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. And you've got to get on Outrigged, his new book, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. And we have one of the ablest legislators in the country, brilliant young attorney who is serving the people as well. Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. Set the table for us, Jasmine Crockett. State Representative Jasmine Crockett, what is happening in Texas?
First of all, good morning.
Good morning
to you and to all the listeners. I think I continue to scratch my head and say, what is going on in Texas? What people don't understand, because for so long, I think that that's been part of the plan, is to make it to where people don't understand really what voter suppression looks like. People don't understand what gerrymandering means. And so what happened is this legislative cycle, the Republicans only had a thin margin in the Texas House. The numbers were 83 to 67, 83 Republicans, 67 Democrats. And when you look at who the Republicans are representing, when you look at the numbers, the Republicans only won the House by maybe 8 to 10,000 votes. These were tight races. There was one Republican that only won by a little over 200 out of maybe 100,000 votes that were cast. And that's because of the way that the maps were drawn 10 years ago. But what the Republicans did not see happening was the change in demographic. And so the demographical change in the state of Texas has really shifted us to the point that we really were able to start picking up seats that a decade ago they thought we would never get. Sadly enough, we are at the point that it's time to redistrict. And what the Republicans have done is, if you look at the legislation that came through, not this session, but the previous session, the 86th legislative session, that legislation was so mild. The Republicans wanted to be public education champions, and that is what they on because they were nervous. They know going into this next election cycle that they plan to draw these districts as red as possible. And so they went after these ridiculous far-right extremist policies. And when you look at it, the Republicans are being challenged from the left and the right. There's actually a spreadsheet that a reporter keeps on his Twitter of the filings. And it's not Democrats that are being challenged. It's the Republicans. And they're being challenged definitely from their own party. And so they wanted to say that they were the most conservative person that was in the race. So therefore, they passed things such as a quote-unquote critical race theory bill. In fact, they passed 2 critical race theory bills. They weren't happy or satisfied with the one that passed during the regular session. They didn't feel like it was racist enough. So therefore, they decided they were going to pass another one in this second special session that they were only granted because Democrats decided to go back. They also wanted to pass voter suppression legislation. And I do want to thank the media. I know the media gets beat up so often, but we would not have that story out. We would not have been able to really put the pressure on D.C., but for the media sticking with the story. And even in listening to some of the redistricting hearings, it was so encouraging to hear so many of the people testifying and said, you've already done everything that you could to suppress our votes. Don't take away the rest of our voices by diluting our representation like you've done before. It was amazing to know that Texans are finally understanding what does suppression look like? Because it doesn't look the exact same as it looked back in the 50s or the early 60s or in the 40s. It looks different, but it's still the same type of scheme. It's still trying to accomplish the same goal. And so now we know that people are really understanding that they were able to roll back access to the ballot box in a state that has already made it more difficult than every other state to vote. And finally, we know that women's reproductive rights have become under attack. Now, obviously, the Supreme Court decided to take up the case out of Mississippi, but what Texas did was pass a bill that I honestly never thought would go into law, because as a practitioner, I was like, this is unconstitutional, and it is almost laughable that you guys think that you'll be able to accomplish this, because there's a such thing as Roe v. Wade. And sadly enough, the Republican-led Supreme Court, and I say it that way because we normally just say the Supreme Court, but it is decided to be partisan. It is decided that it was going to step back and allow women's rights, women's constitutional rights that have been guaranteed to them since before I was on this earth. They decided to duck their heads in the sand and say, we're not dealing with this right now. So right now, Texas is leading this country in the wrong way. There are so many states that have decided that they want to follow us. And the only thing that we've asked, you know, I keep telling people, I feel like a broken record. We've only asked our federal elected officials to do half as much, to be half as aggressive as these Republicans are at taking away our rights. We just want the Democrats to be half as aggressive in restoring our rights. Right now, our rights are being rolled back to the 1960s. We are getting less guarantees than we had back then, and that is problematic. We are fighting for the basics. And so the only thing that we're asking the U.S. Senate to do, we're not asking them to do anything that's super far left-leaning, super duper progressive. We're asking them to make sure that we shore up our fundamental rights. And seemingly, it's like asking them to move a mountain. So I have been sitting on pins and needles, waiting on them to get off their recess, as if this was the time to be recessed, to do what's right. The U.S. House has done their part. All we need is the U.S. Senate to pick up the ball and carry it home.
We're talking with Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett, Jasmine for 100, if you follow her on Twitter, about what's happening in Texas, the rollback on voting and reproductive rights. Reproductive rights are tied to maternal mortality. Black women are disproportionately impacted. Black women die. Brown women die. Poor women die when they have less access to reproductive health, which encompasses so many things. David Daly, we're also joined by Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. Cannot wait to hear his thoughts on all of this. You said there's a wonderful piece that you've written, The New Tyranny. Everyone go to salon.com. In fact, we've tweeted it out and posted it on Facebook this morning. The new tyranny in Texas will be America's future unless Democrats act now. What do you mean?
Well, good morning, Santita. Good morning,
morning.
Representative Crockett. One of the real heroes of the fight in Texas against voter suppression. Would that the United States Senate had the courage of her Democratic colleagues. We would be in a different country. Listen, if you look around the country right now, if you look at what's happening in Austin, Texas, but also in state capitals around the nation, it is really, really clear what Republicans are trying to do. They are using the pretext of voter fraud that did not happen in the 2020 election. They are using the big lie in order to pass all kinds of new, sophisticated voter suppression methods that indeed, as the representative said, do not look like the kinds of restrictions from the era before the Voting Rights Act. They are precise. They involve gerrymandering. They involve sophisticated studies of voter ID. They involve which precincts get the voting machines and which ones don't. There's a long litany of strategies being put into place. In some states, they involve the right for gerrymandered legislatures to take over county election boards in counties that have big Democratic cities. We can see what is going to happen in 2024. What the challenges we saw to the election in 2020 were the dress rehearsal for what will happen if this is a close race in 2024, and Republicans have got their cast in place in all of these states in order to be able to succeed where they were not able to succeed in 2020. There's two other pieces to this. One, as Representative Crockett said, we are in a redistricting year again right now. So every single state legislative district in the country, as well as the 435 congressional districts, are going to be redrawn now that the census has been completed. This process is underway right now around the country. Republicans dominated this process back in 2011. They were able to entrench themselves in office in so many states nationwide, in Texas and Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. After the 2018 elections, there were 59 million Americans living in a state in which one or both chambers of the state legislature was under control of the party that won fewer votes. That's the power of gerrymandering and redistricting in order to absolutely entrench Republican minority rule. They are now going to be able in most of those states to go back and to see, as Representative Crockett mentioned, you can now strengthen those districts where they need to be strengthened, and you can move your other votes elsewhere, and you can draw yourself a new map that can try to lock you in power for the next decade.
Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. You know, you've referred to a bipartisan betrayal. It seems that the Republicans are very progressive, very deliberate, and we don't see much traction. It almost seems as if the Democrats are passive, or am I misreading this?
Santita, extremely passive. Enjoy your guest, and if Representative Jasmine can share with us that reporters that keeps the spreadsheet and how they attack, I would certainly like to know more about that. But when I say by bipartisan betrayal, is I think sometimes this is being confused as black versus white, male versus female. And to me, personally, the bigger picture is the Confederacy versus the Union. The Civil War has never stopped being litigated. The laws that are going into place in Texas are part of the spirit of the doctrine of law of Coventry, that a man needs to oversee the estate of a woman. Let us not forget that women in the United States of America still could be raped in marriage in the 1980s under the statutes of those laws, that persons that were separated but still legally married, women lost court cases trying to sue their husbands to stop their behavior. This is a continuation. So the Confederacy, these bodies of laws of anti-women, of anti-black, of what to do with taxation, how to care for an American, and what is our standard of living. Even when the Union soldiers had fought and won, who did not get pensioned, how the Confederacy was given their full honor and maintained their arms. It's still at the heart of it. What you saw on January 6th was insurrection. The federal government isn't even prosecuting these people as insurrectionists and treasonous. They're prosecuting these persons the same way the people in the Civil War were prosecuted. It's just wrong to the bone. That was insurrection. It was a date certain on when our election turns over. Why else did they show up? And there was only one bullet shot. Every officer, every Secret Service agent, every Homeland Security agent had a gun, and one shot was fired, and officers were killed. This is that copperhead complacency of the Confederacy decapitating our government. It was a dry run. I believe this coming Saturday, maybe September 18th, there's something else that's coming up on where they want to come to the Capitol with arms. The President of the United States could not have an inauguration because of persons inside the military and the threat of violence against the president and an American inauguration. I think we need to take two steps back and look at the big picture. The Confederacy has reassembled. There are 30 state Republican-led legislatures, both houses and the governor, and there are 19 for the Democrats. These are 1867 lines, Santita.
This is unbelievable. State Representative Crockett, I've got about 2 minutes, actually about 90 seconds before we go. Why don't you react to that?
No, it's absolutely true. And I think that that's what's been even more frustrating for me personally is that, you know, when you're in the state house, you only really understand what's going on in your house. You're really, really busy. As you can only imagine, we had thousands of bills that came through, and our sessions are only supposed to be 140 days once every 2 years. But when you are in the nation's capital, you get to see what is going on in so many different states. That is what you do, in addition to being subjected to the insurrection. So not feeling the sense of urgency that we felt that led us to fly out of our state is what is mind-boggling to me. And they need to do something about this. We are in crisis in this country.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, everybody. I want to hear your thoughts. Are we relitigating? Are we refighting the Civil War? It seems so, everybody. Look at the gerrymandering that is happening all over the country. And Jonathan Jackson, State Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas, and David Daley, it's not just happening in the South. We are losing political power in the state of Illinois. Got a lot to talk about today. Anita is calling from North Carolina. I want to hear from everybody else. 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. And we remind you every Saturday morning, Rainbow Push has the International Forum on the Impact Television Network and on rainbowpush.org. We want to get you involved. And we also need your support at Rainbow Push. Go to rainbowpush.org and join the movement, everybody. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita. Let's talk about what's happening in Texas and all over the country, a rollback on voting and reproductive rights and more. Back in just a minute.
Your darkest hour.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I'm going to say opening shots, but I guess that's not in great taste. But you all are great. Thank you so much. Jonathan, are you? Oh, okay. You're out and about? No worries. You know, Rodney Ellis, your biking buddy, is going to be on at the top of the hour. I wonder if he's biking. Uh-huh. Well, I want you to meet State Representative Jasmine Crockett, David Daley. I don't know if you all have formally met Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. He's also my brother, but you should definitely meet him. Like, he's also my brother. That's it. I love him dearly. He's my baby brother at that. I know that drives him crazy.
I love you, Tito. Representative Crockett, could you share that spreadsheet or share that with Tito? I really would like to know how that works. That is like really interesting. You're talking about harassment and so orchestrated. You know, I tell you, just digressing for a moment, I know we may be on radio.
No, we're on Facebook Live. We're on Facebook Live.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, but it's like when when people call Trump a fool. I said, I'm like, he's cagey. He's like a squirrel, and he does these antics. And I deplored you with please do not call him a fool. He acts foolish, but don't follow what he says. Follow what he signs. He shoots with a very straight arrow.
Hey, girl, I'm on the air.
Everything he is signing
I'll be
is
out of here
very,
at 9
very
o'clock. I'm
precise.
like 5 minutes from you. Can we
And,
meet for breakfast? It's your place. I'll call you back.
And now people can see the foundation. People can see the foundation he laid. He was building a foundation.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I think that's why when we have, I think that's the danger of personality-driven politics, and we've gotten so emotional, we're missing the calculation. I love it. Welcome back to Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, my wingman here, Jeremy Geiger, my technical producer and board operator. So grateful for him every Sunday morning. He beats me here, bless his heart, after working all night on Saturday night. Give Jeremy Geiger some love this morning. We do it together. I'm Santita Jackson. This is Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We've been joined by Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. You can follow her on Twitter at Jasmine4100. FOR 100. Brilliant attorney and public servant, best-selling author of Rat Effed, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, or the true story of the secret plan to steal our democracy. Yeah, that's right. And unrigged. How Americans are battling back to save democracy. And Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. Jonathan, you started something just on the other side of the break before we go to Anita from North Carolina. What did you want to find out from State Representative Crockett?
She made mention of a reporter that has a spreadsheet that shows all of the legislators, the Republicans that are being attacked. I really would like to know the name of that reporter.
I'm not sure that that's what I said. I was wondering what the spreadsheet was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. No, I was just saying that I was thankful to the national news media for making sure that they kept up with this story and kept it out front as it relates to voting rights. And now they're going to start talking about gerrymandering, and they've definitely talked about abortion rights, so that it's clear that, what they like to do in the state houses is kind of sweep everything under the rug. So I've been very appreciative to the news media that normally gets a bad rap.
I apologize. I'm sorry for misquoting you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So I was like, let me see what spreadsheet this is.
No, we're just
I don't want to say state renter representative has always said, and I'm quoting her. No, I don't want to. I don't want to say it wrong.
No. We are trying to get this right. But to that point, I don't think that we're hearing enough about this story, State Representative Crockett. And certainly, I need someone like you. I need you specifically to help us to put flesh on these bones, because this is what's happening in Texas does not portend well for the rest of the country. And in fact, it's happening in the rest of the country. We're seeing outright abortion bans in other states. We are seeing rollbacks on voting rights. We're seeing gerrymandering that David Daley has so brilliantly and so deliberately and so precisely written about. Let me start with you, Texas State Representative. I'm already putting you in the state Senate. I'm going to have you in Congress and in the presidency in a minute. Doesn't bother me. Hey, name it, claim it. But is there anything that could be done or should be done to further disseminate this story?
It's so tough because and you've worked in media for a very long time, and that typically, these stories, especially a political story like this, they only last a minute, right? And I don't think that the general public understands that really it's just a hot minute So many times we've been on TV, and when I say we, I'm sure we've all had an opportunity to be on TV, but people don't understand that, like, you'll get bumped in a heartbeat. They'll be like, oh, something else happened. And like, you're off. Like, they are done with that
Absolutely.
story. And so, I was reflecting and speaking with another representative, and I said, man, I am just now thinking about the fact that for 3 months straight, I've been on national news at least once a week. It's really been more than that, but at least once a week for 3 months, talking about Texas and talking about the legislative fight that we have. And as we were talking, we were really taking a deeper dive into, do we see news outlets covering other state representatives? Not really. It's really kind of an anomaly. Normally, the people that you see are going to be on that federal level, or they've been on the federal level before. And so for me, is it enough? No, but is it more than the norm? Absolutely, right? Because I do think that this is a 5-alarm fire. I absolutely do. And, what we are seeing out of our federal elected leaders is more so just reactionary. We talked about the fact, or it was specifically stated, that Trump laid the foundation. And I kept saying, y'all, you were voting for Trump because you knew his name and you just wanted to do something different than vote Democratic. But what he has done, what you don't realize, what the average person doesn't pay attention to, is he has stacked these courts. And so these judges have lifetime appointments. And when I say stack the courts, I'm not just talking about the Supreme Court. I am talking about the trial courts. I am talking about the federal appellate courts and how difficult it is to even make it through the process because of these Trump appointees. But the average person wasn't paying attention to that. The average person doesn't know about that, right? That's what presidential candidates talk about when they're out there campaigning at all. And so, yeah, he laid the foundation, and Democrats didn't fight hard enough, in my opinion, then. And now we're sitting there and we're looking like, man, things look a little bad. What should we do? You guys have the majority. Use your power. And they still are looking like they're confused by what it is that they can do, what it is they were elected to do, and honestly, what it is that they are charged with doing because the Constitution dictates so. It is frustrating.
Well, you're about to make Jonathan faint with laughter. What's going on, John? and Dave is about to passing out.
Oh,
Dave, you, and then Jonathan.
sure.
Well, Jonathan, okay, I'm sorry, because you're out and about. Jonathan, what's going on?
Well, let me tell you this. The part that gets underneath my skin, I apologize, David, is that you asked specifically why the bipartisan betrayal. When our Attorney General at the time, Eric Holder, doesn't raise his voice, when our Attorney General, Miss Lynch, although she had a very limited term, isn't raising this issue, when the former president before Trump is not raising his issue, how will the people know? So the people were like lulled to sleep. And to the point of Representative Jasmine, the people in power knew we weren't being led by those that had the voice and the microphone. That, to me, is a sign of betrayal.
Dave Daly?
Democrats are acting like they are a weak minority party that don't have any cards to play, when in reality, they control both houses of Congress and the White House. Their impotence on voting rights is a political choice. They could choose to have the same courage that the Texas Democrats had and force this issue. Although Texas Democrats were in the minority, they did everything that they could to advance and stop that bill. The Democrats in Washington right now in the U.S. Senate have the power in their hands to actually pass the legislation that would prevent these kinds of state legislative hijackings and power plays and voter suppression and assault on free and fair elections. And they're not doing it. And it is so frustrating to those of us who are watching this and who are watching what's happening in state capitals because we can see where this is headed. Democrats are likely going to lose the U.S. House in 2022 because of gerrymandering alone. Democrats only have a 5-seat majority in Congress. They could lose that simply through Republican remapping in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas by itself. And that is before you get into what Republicans are going to do in Kansas and Kentucky and Tennessee and New Hampshire. The clock is ticking on this. The Democrats don't have until 2024. They have until November of 2022. And these lines that we keep talking about, these district maps, they are being drawn right now in state capitals around the country. So the next decade is being drawn this moment. Democrats have got the power to do something about it. And, you know, it sounds hyperbolic to say Democrats have the power to step in and defend the notion of representative democracy itself before it disappears. But that is what is actually the threat. Anybody who says it can't happen here isn't paying attention to what really is happening in state capitals right now in 2021 as we speak.
Jonathan Jackson, before I go to Dr. Deborah Verholden, who will help us to understand the very real life and death consequences of banning or really culling back women's reproductive rights. I mean, are Democrats defending democracy or corporatocracy? I mean, are we watching this right-wing Democratic inclination, the DLC driven? I mean, you have a new set of blue dogs who are, interestingly enough, now headed by Black people who defend corporatism and corporations and not people. Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, we're seeing one party, as my father has said, with two names. This is not a change of direction, unfortunately. So the same lobbyists that give to candidate A gives to candidate B, the same lobbyists, same poison political fundraising machine that gives to Republicans in power, gives to the Democrats in power. We've not, as Democrats, determined who wants fundamentally a different direction. And so money is absolutely speaking. This starts with the lobbyists introducing themselves to our elected officials, writing their legislation, saying they want to support them, and some people unfortunately capitulate. We should demand the same funds that they give to the other side, and we should be able to hold on to our principles and values. It's that simple. And to the point that was being made by like Dave on Democrats having the power. Remember when Trump said he was going to use, Democrats used the hyperbolic language of he's going to use the nuclear option. He's going to not seek to have consensus. He's going to ram this Supreme Court nominee down with the majority. I thought that language was like very crazy. It's not nuclear. He's in power, and he's using the law that the power was given to him. We have the same power. This is when you start talking about, unfortunately, cowardice. And if we look at the history of it, the right wing and the Confederacy is violent. What we saw on January 6th was violence. And to the degree that we're not trying to go forward with the commission, and these persons are not being prosecuted to the full extent of the law for threatening elected officials, you can curse at an elected official and be arrested. These people came in there with arms and were not arrested. And now they're being given 6 months and vegan-free diets and they are negotiating. And some people only got months. Are you killing me? And they killed officers in the name of 9/11. Isn't that what they say? Oh, let's stand by the blue. They killed their own officers. They threatened them. It was on the Senate for the panel, and they don't care. That is the most scary thing I can think of. Santita.
Unbelievable.
Violence that lurks.
Well, you know what? We have got Dr. Deborah Verholden, brilliant epidemiologist, the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. I think for all of us here, David Daly from Salon and from Fair Vote, and the author of the bestseller Rat Heft, and Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett, and Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. There are some very real consequences when you peel back. We talk about the politics, that's important, but the real life consequences of rolling back reproductive rights for women, particularly Black women and poor women, it can mean life and death, Dr. Verholden.
Yeah, it's a great point. And my shtick is equity. And this is only going to further inequity, because what it's going to do is it's going to allow those who have more privilege and have more resources, they'll just simply go to another state, or they'll get a private procedure done, et cetera. And for those who can't afford it, they will be forced into later term abortions. They'll face whatever economic hardship comes along with having to figure it out once you cross that 6-week mark, which is just ridiculous, because most women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. And then the real concern that I have, and this is very much public health, is that there is now this legal remedy for anybody who aids or abets an abortion. And I worry that this new law will also be used to categorically target Black and brown people. It'll be really interesting to see who becomes the target of the enforcement activity around this law. So the way I see it, Black and brown women will likely be disparaged in this law, and then the people that support them will also be the target of criminal activity because of it. And I would find it hard to believe that won't happen disproportionately to certain people.
Absolutely. Anita from North Carolina. Anita, what's on your mind today? You're on with one of your favorite people, Jonathan Jackson. Anita?
Yeah, I heard. I have an airplane going on over my head. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
But they brought up some very important things about all the appointees of the courts and the appellates, and that's so serious. And the Supreme Court, and that's why we're dealing with this right now, is because of what happened with President Obama when he couldn't put his person on the Supreme Court. And then the appellate courts, and this is just, cheating is never good, but we got to remember the history of America. The corporations had control over everybody's lives, and women was just something they used to be able to make factory workers, or what we would call factory workers today in the field, to, give them whatever they want. And they're obviously still trying to pimp women to have what they want from women, whether she's in a relationship with her boyfriend or her husband. They can't have that power and authority over anybody. They're not taking care of these people till they're 18 years old. Parents are. So they can't just reach in and say, hey, we want your reproductive rights, whether you're with your boyfriend or with your husband, for however young you are. They cannot have it, so they can have your mind and tear you apart so that your family and your future is in their hands. They can't have it anymore. They can't have all of the profit. They just can't do it anymore.
Well, Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. Oh, I just feel like I hear our foremothers crying out who had no agency over their bodies in slavery. No agency, and even after slavery. That was how Rosa Parks became famous. She would pursue cases of Black women who'd been raped by white men, but there was no prosecution forthcoming. It's just, and you got a lot of Black people who looked all kind of ways because of just that. We've got a lot to talk about today. What do you make of this rollback on voting rights and reproductive rights that it's happening in Texas? We're watching it in Texas, but it's happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. And it has real life and death consequences for everybody. We're watching the gerrymandering, which is going to shape our lives for years to come. And what will that mean, Dave Daly? We've got to get some closing thoughts from you on the other side. Got to find out what's going on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Please go to rainbowpush.org and follow us throughout the week. And meet me on my radio show on the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, Chicago's Progressive Talk and AM 950 Radio. In fact, I am their morning drive host on the Santita Jackson Show from 6 to 8 Central Standard Time. hope to see you there in the morning. We have a lot of stirring conversations. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
And I'm gonna thank God for how He taught me. Gonna thank my God how He kept me. And I'm gonna thank Him 'cause He never left me. And I'm gonna thank God.
With you this morning, Dave Daly. I know you've got to leave, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna get your closing thoughts when we get on the other side of this commercial
You
break.
got
Okay?
it. Let me try to tie all this together.
Oh, please. You'll have a couple minutes to do so. But you all can talk amongst yourselves while we are on Facebook Live. Just remember that. I can't
How
believe
bad are
it.
these maps going to do down there this time, Representative Carson?
This is crazy.
So, so they started having hearings last week, and obviously this is my first redistricting, but as a trained lawyer who's contemplating litigation, my question was, and it was a complaint that many people raised, was that they were testifying and they're not testifying about maps because they've not been released whatsoever, right? And so we actually draw our own maps, our own first iteration of maps as delegations. And so I threw my map probably back in May, waiting for the numbers to actually be put in the system. Basically, the numbers that were used when I drew my map were based on demographers' anticipation of what the numbers would be. And so, I was like, I feel like I should release my map and at least have people testify based upon what it is that I'm thinking, right? Like whether they're for it or against it, whether these are communities of common interest, things like that. I was like, I don't know why no one has released maps. And so I was told, like, yeah, that's the smart thing to do so that the record is clear specifically on what it is that people are testifying about. So they are supposed to conclude hearings on Friday. They did not go around the state whatsoever. All the hearings have been held in Austin. People can sign up to testify virtually if they do so 48 hours in advance. So that's going to be a big push for my team on Monday, is to drop proposed maps, which may have been some of my neighbors, but I don't know, it's not been the most organized thing. And to think about the fact that Democrats knew this was coming, and I was nervous, so I started drawing my maps back in May as soon as I could figure out how to get on the software. It's kind of frustrating that people are still like, oh, what's the software? How do we get on? And I'm like, guys, are you kidding me? like, we didn't know this was coming. Like, I thought that I was way behind, So seemingly I'm not behind. Once again, Democrats being Democrats, right?
No. I don't know. No one can be this mentally and intellectually lethargic. Okay? No. Because I tell you what, when they want to knock out Bernie Sanders, they sure know. When they get the mind to do that, they knock him out.
That's true.
Come on now, they know to take somebody out now. So what's this?
Yeah, I have no idea. Dallas County we are in a weird situation. I personally believe we had a significant undercount. Obviously, there was an undercount overall throughout the country, but Dallas County specifically is a majority minority county. And so I think that we got hit a little harder.
Sure.
So the numbers show that Dallas County only grew at a rate of about 10%, while the rest of the state grew at an average of 20%. And so Dallas County is fighting to keep all of our house seats. So we may lose a house seat as well, which is
we're losing one here. Hold on one second. David?
Yeah.
You're going to have 90 seconds, okay?
Oh, sure. I can tell the history of the world in 90 seconds.
Oh, I know you can do it now. Come on, Mel Brooks. Hey, everybody, stay tuned for the second hour of Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. What happens when we lose our reproductive and voting rights all in one fell swoop? It's happening. Even the Supreme Court stepped back on reproductive rights. They didn't step back as much as they didn't punt. That was a deliberate legal strategy. These are some of the most brilliant legal minds in the United States. What's going on, everybody? David Daly, uh, author of the best-selling Rat Effed and Unrigged. Your thoughts?
Let me try to tie a little bit of this together because I think that there's a real connection between voting rights, reproductive rights, the Texas legislature, the Supreme Court, and it goes back a long way. But you can go back to the legislative maps that were drawn in Texas in 2011, the last time we went through a redistricting process. Those maps did not pass through pre-clearance as they had to under the Voting Rights Act. And so they were in legal limbo in 2012 when a court said, you can hold the next election, but you're going to have to make a lot of tweaks to these maps because they disproportionately make it more difficult for minorities to elect candidates of their own choosing. 2013 comes along. The John Roberts Conservative Court guts pre-clearance in the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County versus Holder case. What happens in Texas? Well, the very afternoon that the Shelby County decision comes down that puts an end to pre-clearance is when Texas passes its voter ID bill, enacts a voter ID bill that they knew would make it difficult for 600,000 Latinos in Texas who were registered to vote but lacked what would now be required. And then the very next day, Texas just goes ahead and adopts those racist gerrymandered maps.
I've got 20
and puts
seconds.
them into law. So this is a little bit of a Texas two-step, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have got the Supreme Court enabling the legislature, and then on reproductive rights, you've got a legislature that goes ahead and passes a draconian restriction,
Hold that thought.
undermining Roe.
Stay right there. Stay right there.
And this court is okay with it.
And that's right. You're going to have to complete that thought on the other side of the break. You can't get away like that. Not in Matey's Race. Back with more Keep Hope Alive in just a minute. Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
How many people will have to die before we will take a stand?
20 years ago, yesterday, September 11th, 2001. I'm Santita Jackson. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jackson is making great strides in his recovery with COVID 19. Indeed, Mrs. Jackson was released from the hospital last week. Thank you so much for your prayers. And thank God for their recovering. They go from strength to strength every day. This is Sunday, September 12th, 2021. We dedicate the show to the victims of September 11th, and they didn't stop at 2,900 plus. Actually, you had frontline workers who breathed in that toxic air. Many of them died. Many of them are suffering today. People who lived in the area. A lot of housing projects are in that immediate area of the World Trade Center where they used to be. Yeah, a lot of people got very, very sick. The volunteers, tens of thousands of people, have been struggling for 20 years and fighting for compensation. We pray for all of their souls and all of their families. And all of their families. We pray for peace everywhere, all the time, everybody. And our dear friend, veteran, groundbreaking journalist, WGN anchor, former anchor, Allison Payne made her transition. 57 years of age, 9-time Emmy winner. There was a time, not too long ago, when you didn't see too many African Americans anchoring major newscasts. And this is WGN, the superstation that's seen in a fourth of the nation. She was their lead anchor, and she made her transition. We love you, Allison. Thank you for all of your contributions and your friendship and your sisterhood down through the years. We just love you, Allison. Love you, love you. Love you, love you, love you. Let's talk about Texas and Roe v. Wade and the abortion ban and voting rights and voter suppression. Suppression of voting rights and reproductive rights. What will all of that mean? Please continue to weigh in on Reverend Jackson's Twitter poll. Go to his Twitter page at RevJJackson, and vote on this question. In 2022, who will be helped most by Texas rollbacks on voting and reproductive rights? We're coming into the midterms, everybody. We're coming into the midterms. We're hearing a lot of rumblings about maybe the Democrats will lose the House. And what will that mean? Would Donald Trump become the Speaker? Dave Daly, before you go today, needed you to wrap everything up for us before we go to break.
Absolutely. The decision that the court made last week to uphold this anti-abortion law in Texas, I mean, it's the product of decades of strategizing by anti-abortion forces and a relentless conservative focus on winning the courts. But that's not the only careful right-wing project that contributed to this, backdoor assault on 5 decades of constitutional protection. It is inextricably bound to the long-term Republican war on voting rights, which is itself a two-front effort between red state legislatures and a conservative Supreme Court majority. It's a Texas two-step in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. You've got unelected, tenured judges who have put a stake in the voting rights, who've ended preclearance, who've now made an assault on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in the Arizona case over the summer. And then after blessing those sophisticated voter suppression methods, as well as providing a green light for essentially unlimited partisan and racial gerrymandering, mm-hmm. You have uninhibited lawmakers, untethered from any accountability, who can pass laws dramatically out of step with voters like the new bill. And then the court goes ahead and smiles on those efforts as well. It is a nifty closed loop, really, and it has the added benefit of sheltering Republicans from any consequences for their extremism and from any real fear that a changing electorate will threaten entrenched one-party rule. Democrats have got a chance in Congress right now to do something about this. They've got the For the People Act. They've got the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. These bills have got to be passed. We need them.
That's right. You got to at least suspend the filibuster. Why aren't Democrats doing that? We're talking with a state representative, Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. She's joined by Harris County Commissioner down there in Texas, Jonathan Jackson's biking buddy, Commissioner Rodney Ellis, and of course, Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push, and Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. Indeed, they pulled her from Johns Hopkins to create the School of Public Health. She's going to talk to us about the real life and death consequences of rolling back reproductive rights for women. I mean, it increases maternal mortality, if you can believe that, and we are already at Global South levels of maternal mortality in the United States. What is all of this going to mean? Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
Over and over again. What have I got that I can give? We can give over and over again. What have I got that I can give? Oh my God, see, to love and to teach you, to hold and to need you. What more can I give? What have I got that I can give? What have I got that I can give? To love and to teach you, to hold and to need you. What more can I give?
Jonathan?
I'm right here.
Hey, we've got Commissioner Rodney Ellis on with you.
Brother Jonathan, how are you, my friend?
What is going on, my senator?
We have Dr. Verhoeven on the line and Representative Jasmine Crockett.
Mhm.
So you understand the law.
And we snuck in attorney Reverend Dr. Todd Urey. Snuck him
Oh,
in.
you are my favorite friend.
Oh, yeah. But we have to find out what's going on in Texas. What are you doing down there? What is it?
That's why we have young fighters. Oh, Jasmine Crockett. I want her, and I want her to be as brilliant after her 26 years, and still be in her right mind. I may be out of my mind. She's bright.
As she can be. I'm just trying to figure out how. But but what is it? I mean, because you see what in California. Well, California is like it's majority minority state, but it has a very progressive tradition and a very right wing tradition. I guess every action merits an equal and opposite reaction. But wow, do you think that Gavin Newsom's going to be able to pull it out?
I think so. It's a challenge. The issue is that the election date is when a lot of folks who will be for him may not necessarily go out. And the way that initiative referendum works, you got to vote against it. So if you pass the recall, it's whoever gets the plurality of the votes gets it.
That's right.
That's a big challenge. At some point, they need to straighten it up. I can remember when I was in the legislature when they passed the initiative referendum in California. They were pushing that in Texas and term limits. And I was thinking, fine, come on with it. And then I think the other side decided when they got in power that they didn't want it. It's essentially ungovernable. That and that ranked choice voting that they do, so that every time you have to spend money. And there's that group, even friends of ours, by the way, people on the right as well as the left, who make a living off of those initiatives. To run that, they thrive. They look forward to that season so they can raise an unprecedented amount of money to kill or pass a measure.
Hey, Rodney, Senator,
Yes, sir.
question. I got to call you something, Viking buddy.
Rodney is what they put on the ballot.
You remember when that car thief, the congressman that created the club for the steering, he put out maybe $2 a signature to start the 10% of the vote cast for Governor Gray Davis to start Gray Davis's voter recall. And but he created the club and became very wealthy. But he was a car thief his whole life. Then he made it to the Congress.
Huh? Oh man, it's amazing. I don't remember that, but when they first did that, think about Jasmine and folks breaking that quorum in Texas. I guess that was 2003. You had the recount coming out of Bush v. Gore. Then you had the recall in California where Schwarzenegger went in, and you had the redistricting in Texas going on at the same time. Here we are rolling forward, and you have another recall going on in California.
Yeah, so the guy that put the money out to start the recall going, he's out of San Diego. I can't think of his name at the moment. That laid the foundation for Schwarzenegger to jump in there on that 6-week election. Then Schwarzenegger had all those sexual assault cases come up, and he's going around greasing his body and standing in front of mirrors and in contests And then they asked him, what did he have to say about sexual assault? He says, as soon as he wins, he will investigate it. And he won. And he won. He will investigate himself as soon as he gets around to it. Yeah.
You know what? Let me come up. You know, you all just foolishness. Y'all just.
You need a friend. And Jesus said, call my name, because I'll be there.
When you're down in trouble, you need some love and care.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. You could always just step back and just listen to the Queen of Soul, Queen of Music, really, the great Aretha Franklin, the icon. Everybody, I'm Santita Jackson. This is Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We are talking about the rollback on Texas voting rights and reproductive rights, and on and on and on it has gone. And it is going all around the country. We've got a tremendous panel of guests with us, starting with Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett, uh, able attorney, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant attorney and state representative. We are joined by Harris County, Texas Commissioner Rodney Ellis, and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Executive Vice President of Rainbow Push, lawyer, pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, and Dr. Deborah Holden, straight out of Johns Hopkins University. Full scholarship, everybody. Came out of there 24 with their PhD in epidemiology. Indeed, they brought her to Michigan State University. She's the Associate Dean of the School of Public Health, of which she's the architect, and Jonathan Jackson, who is the national spokesman for Rainbow Push. Before we get into this, a lot of people are asking about Reverend and Mrs. Jackson this morning. Jonathan, would you want to say something?
Sure. Thank you for your prayers. I was able to spend yesterday afternoon evening with my father. His spirits are high. He's feeling good. He's very anxious to get back out. He's going through therapy for his Parkinson's. He is now COVID-free, and my mother is home, so very excited about both. And his heart and mind is on civil rights. I just find it amazing that, as he said before, Parkinson's has him, but he has Parkinson's has him. No, he has Parkinson's. Parkinson's doesn't have him. And and I'm talking with him about his personal health and things that he needs. And he's, no, look at what's happening in Texas. No, look at what they're doing in the state legislature. No, look what the Confederacy is doing. His mind is just lucid and sharp, and he wants to fight every day. So for those that God is blessed to live a long, healthy life, your time is not over, and God has need for you. So fight on. And for those that have never fought, take the spirit of Reverend Jesse Jackson and join in. Make a difference.
Amen. And, and he's not with us this morning because he's actually in a therapy session. He wanted to, of course, Jonathan, delay that, and that's not how that works in the rehabilitation facility. So we're just grateful. But we're doing this show because he instructed me to do this show. He said, I want to talk about this. And he gave, and as you know, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis, he gave me, he delineated the points that he wanted us to hit, and I hope that we're faithful to it. What is going on in Texas, Commissioner Rodney Ellis?
Well, what you have is a large state, second largest one in the country, and people who have been in power and have run it in many ways like a plantation for so long. And they know the demographics are not in their favor, so they are doing everything they can to stack the deck, as people did when Reconstruction ended, to try to hold on to power. I mean, it's just, I think Representative Crockett and her group went the phrase Jim Crow too. It's really a modified version of what went on when Reconstruction ended to keep blacks, Hispanics, now, of course, women, people of Asian descent from having that rightful seat at the table. Texas is a minority state, and they know that policies will not keep them in place. They'll do as much as they can to pull over some folks who wouldn't be normal allies and spend all of the money. They can find some, by the way, of all stripes and persuasions that they can buy if they're willing to pay enough. But they see how close Beto O'Rourke came when he ran for the United States Senate. So they're doing as much as they can. That's what voter suppression is about. And in the process, they're doing as much as they can to answer to a sliver, a very small sliver that controls the Republican Party, who are ultra right wing, all of the red meat issues they can get. Think about it. I mean, by the way, I'm so glad your parents are doing well. I had dinner with Ambassador Young and Andrea, his daughter, who runs the NAA, runs the ACLU in Georgia now. And he sends his regards. But we were just talking about the battles that you all had to go through, the civil rights era, your dad, and how people went so far to the right, ultra right wing, George Wallace, people of that ilk, to hold on to that base. And that's what's happening here. So think about it. In Texas, anybody can get a gun. The registration, they call it constitutional carry. Wrap the right words on. Take away a woman's right to choose. The most restrictive voting laws in Texas and in the state. All of the crazy stuff you can think of. Sometimes when I go to legislative conferences, Representative Crockett, when I was a state senator, somebody would say, I'm from Alabama, Mississippi. I'd say, I'm from Texas. Thank God for Alabama, Mississippi. So I won't be the one that has to hold my head in shame the lowest in the room. But it's really embarrassing. And we got to fight against it. We got to get the word out. We can't give up. In the spirit, as you said, of your daddy, no matter how tough it gets, we got to fight it. And getting rid of that filibuster is a big part of it. And let me tell you, I saw an article, Santita, that you sent me. I think it was, can't remember which magazine. I read it about 3 a.m. this morning. But it just goes through how we have the power but don't use it. And the filibuster, of course, was put in place to stop civil rights legislation. And when the Grand Old Party was in power of the House and the Senate, they changed the rule. They narrowed it a bit anyway. But hey, I'll close on this Clinton line. There are consequences to elections. You think about it. If O'Rourke, since you referred to Texas, if Beto O'Rourke had won that Senate seat instead of Cruz, you'd have one more senator there. But, so look, regardless of what the rules are, we got to fight them. We got to raise all the hell we can to get rid of that filibuster so we can pass things to let people enjoy our democracy. But regardless of whatever the rules are, we're going to have to play on them. We're going to have to fight. We cannot let this continue to happen.
Legislatively, do you have any remedies, State Representative Crockett, to deal with this rollback on voting and reproductive rights?
No. I
Wow.
mean, even if we did, we don't have the numbers. That's been the issue. And at this point in time, I don't think that we have the will of the Democrats to continue the fight.
No, say that. Hold on, stop. I need you to say that one more time. You don't think we have the what?
The will of the Democrats to continue the fight.
Okay.
And so that's, I felt like for instance, I didn't think that it was time to go back. In fact, the majority that were still out didn't feel like it was time to go back. And so until they respect us and they are forced to have to actually negotiate, because that's where we are. It can't be the statesmanship that makes sense where we're on the floor and we debate and we get logical common sense amendments through on bills. Instead, just like the governor was saying, I'll make sure they're arrested, even though that was not within his purview, but the speaker went ahead and put out warrants for us. They were willing to go as far as it took on their side. We needed to be willing to go just as far or further. And I just don't think that will is there. I think that, there are a number of Democrats that are about to lose their seats. And a number of them probably went back thinking that it was going to help them. But they're about to lose their seats in the House because at the end of the day, these people are ruthless, and this is a power grab. And so they're going to do everything that they can to maintain control, including these maps that will not make sense. And right now, we won't have to deal with pre-clearance. That is why they are trying to force this through. So the fact that the Senate has been on recess again really stresses me out. And it almost tells us the story that we really don't want to read. The fact that Nancy Pelosi made sure they came back early to deal with H.R. 4. But the fact that the Senate has H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 sitting there, and they've not done anything to come back early, even though we are in, I don't know how many levels of crises right now, kind of tells me and foreshadows where we're going.
Jonathan Jackson, what do you say? Coming down to political will, which is
I,
so ironic given
I
the
could.
fact that, Reverend and the Rainbow returned the Senate to the Democrats in 1986 at the height of the Reagan Revolution. I mean, it can be done.
And that was because of a spirit of fight back. Our father didn't have the political sense and judgment to know that you could not fight back. He believed in God enough and the will of the people enough that he had unmitigating gall, the audacity to take on Reagan at his height. I mean, there's a God factor, as mom and dad oftentimes talk about. And there are 60 elected officials, African American, in our Congressional Black Caucus. I don't hear this sound. It's not a song. It's not ringing in the average person's ear. Our people don't know. They're not being led. And to your point, it has to start at the administration. It has to come out of the Democratic Party. It has to come from those persons that we have voted for in the past, that have had the highest office, that now create the biggest foundation, that are now living in obscurity. No, this isn't something you can ever get off of the battlefield for. You have to continue to fight. And simply, Santita, it's all about power. People that have it never want to give it up. They don't have to. What Trump had, what he showed you, is he had power and he knew what it was, and he was willing to use it. Although he abused it, he did many things that were terrible. He did everything that was legal. It was unethical, but it was legal. Now that we have the right ethics and we have the right legality and we have the power, why don't we use it? And it has to be frustrating for generation after generation to keep being told, wait, let's have bipartisan. We should do this joint. Take your time. You're moving too fast. You have to look at the other side. No, a black woman has never been interviewed to be a chief justice. And we had the power under Clinton, under Obama, under Carter. I mean, we've had the power before, and we have delivered. This is so frustrating to come back to our people time and time again. And now what do they want to start the whole apparatus over in the next 6 months? All the Republicans are in place. Santita, look at a casino. Casinos generally operate on a 2% edge. That's all they need. Roll the dice 100 times. If it comes over to your side, the house side, 2% more often, more frequently, the casino will always make money. The Republicans know that's with the electorate as well. They just need an edge, any edge, a 2% edge and advantage. The will of the people in Texas is against what the governor is doing. But the political party has all the white men in power that are writing the laws and dictating. It's about them preserving their powers from now and into the future. That was the whistle. That was the howl. That was the bell that Trump was ringing. And that has been activated. The Confederacy is moving around, Santita. And I hope we raise this to the appropriate level. It should be on every news program. Our people just don't know. And that's the part that hurts me the most. People would care
if they knew.
Influential voices are not saying anything. It's not about a Gavin Newsom recall. That's just a little piece. This thing started with the Fugitive Slave Act and trying to arrest legislatures in Wisconsin. And then it went on to Texas. And it's going to keep on happening. And that's the big picture.
Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, you've got the most popular politicians in the United States. They're Democrats. Now, we do see Senator Sanders out here raising a ruckus, but we don't see President Obama. We do need to see him. We do need to see former First Lady Obama. We need to see these people because they energize folks. People, we love them and we need them. What can we do to move the needle? Or do you think that's the issue, or is that an issue?
Well, good morning to all of you. I think the issue is basic math, as our good sister legislator just kind of laid out. When you don't have the political will with your core representation, you got to figure out how do you get outside that box. This is where Reverend, I think, his example about coalition building is particularly critical. When the numbers are not in your favor, you got to go back and understand that it is no longer a secret about what Black power, Brown power, anything else is. All you got to do is read the Kerner Commission report, and they were real clear that sloganism is not sufficient. You can have nice sound bites and still be totally politically impotent. And so we're good in media presentation, but not good in policy position. And so our issue has to be, how do we form a coalition that's the firewall? We talked about this going into the 2020 election, that everybody was focusing on who was going to capture the White House. And in many instances, we abandoned the state house and the state houses across the country. And going into 2020, and this was my mantra, 2020 was not about 2020. 2020 was about 2031. Because with the decennial census and reapportionment, the political rules were going to be drawn as we are sitting here on this conversation today. So here's the issue. Where do we build the coalitions that help us to get past this gridlock? Because as long as we keep playing the exclusive party game, we're going to keep getting gamed, because you just don't have, when the numbers are not in your favor. We saw this with Newt Gingrich and the Contract on America, that they began to very creatively and very methodically start undermining state houses. And why is that critical? Because while we're arguing about $3.5 trillion of a human infrastructure bill, we don't talk about the almost $2 trillion that pass through state budgets across the country every single year. If we got more engaged and more aware of what goes on in state capitals, you got to give our sisters some backup. We can't just give them lip service on Sunday and don't show up for the bill hearing on Monday. We've got to start getting folks trained in being in the room where it happens, so that when they start raising these kinds of issues and continue to try to pass these laws, it is not just about being a pundit, it's about being a participant. And we got to participate in this process and not leave it to the politicians themselves to just, they're not going to find courage. They got to run for reelection. You got to give them some courage. You got to show up with the crew and say, here we are. We're going to be on the record. We're going to challenge you directly. And we want to see how you're going to tell us no to our face, because otherwise we give in to this notion that our only investment is every 4 years or whatever the election cycle is, and we leave every day in between up to chance.
Everybody, let's talk about this. Where do we go from here? All hands on deck. All hands on deck. We've got gerrymandering that's at stake here. We're going to hear from Dr. Deborah Holden when we get on the other side of the break, because there are real life and death consequences to these decisions. There are. I mean, and they're happening right now. As reproductive bans go into effect, maternal mortality is going to skyrocket. That is what happens. More of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Hope you'll join me on my show in the morning from 6 to 8 every morning. The Santita Jackson Show on the Chicago's Progressive Talk. Back in just a minute.
God can brighten up
If you want to say anything, I can keep you off Facebook Live so you can.
How I got over, how did I make it over?
How. More of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Hope you'll join me on my radio show on Chicago's Progressive Talk and AM 950 Radio. We're in syndication. The Chicago's Progressive Talk is the largest progressive talk radio station in the country. We do their morning drive from 6 to 8 Central Standard Time. Got to send my love to Abraham down there in Venezuela, one of my morning stars. My sweet. Happy birthday to you, Abraham. Sending you much love today. And give all of our love to our brothers and sisters in Venezuela. They've been sending a lot of prayers Reverend and Mrs. Jackson's way, remembering all of the wonderful times that Reverend Jackson has had in Venezuela. In fact, he was honored to be the last person to speak before the president of Venezuela at the funeral of former president, then President Chavez. Have a lot of love down in Venezuela. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. We're talking about the rollback on our reproductive and voting rights. We've got Commissioner Rodney Ellis from Harris County. They're about to overtake Cook County as the third largest county in the country. Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett, brilliant lawyer and able and brilliant legislator, and Executive Vice President of Rainbow Push and the senior pastor of the iconic uh, Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland. But I want to bring up Dr. Deborah Holden. Dr. Deborah Holden, when we talk about elections, of course, Commissioner Ellis just said, help to remind us that elections have consequences. But this is when when the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Maternal mortality becomes an issue when women don't have access to reproductive rights. When women don't have the full range of access, or I should say, access to the full range of reproductive rights, just walk us through it. What happens?
Yeah, so what happens is people get forced into making choices that aren't in their best interest, or they have a lack of choices. So if you deny a woman's right to have an abortion, or if you put barriers up to it, women are forced to then do things like, procedures that are not medically authorized or are not provided by medical professionals. It creates a huge equity issue because those who can will, right? They'll find a private physician or they'll travel across state lines and do those types of things. And women who can't afford to do that or don't have the resources to be able to do that won't have those choices. We'll likely see many more later stage abortions as people scramble and waste time trying to figure things out. We'll have much later term abortions, which can be problematic both physically and psychologically for women. So it just opens up a whole world of problems. And I feel like the line is not real clear. What happens if later in a pregnancy you find out or you have some kind of medical complication? The technology is amazing. I'm a new grandma. Mm-hmm. My daughter got a blood test when she was 6 weeks pregnant. They could test for genetic abnormalities. They could tell the gender of the baby just by doing a blood draw on mom. But mind you, she got that test at 6 weeks because, unlike a lot of women, she actually knew at 6 weeks that she was pregnant. And then it took a week or so for those results to come back. So what if that result had come back and she had some kind of genetic abnormality or something like that and chose to terminate that pregnancy? She would now, if she were Texas, not have that option, or it would be a much more complicated, process for her. So I think we're talking about both. There will be physical, social and psychological, and financial implications of this law. And I'll just say it's just bad. It's bad public health and it's bad public policy. We already, of all of the developed nations, of all of the leading nations, we have one of the highest maternal and infant mortality rates. We have some of the worst fetal and maternal outcomes. And it makes no sense. We spend all this money on healthcare, yet our people continue to live sicker and die younger. So doing things that impede women's ability to manage their own health. And we talk about reproductive health, but your reproductive health is linked to your overall health. So it's just bad public policy to do anything that's going to complicate women's ability to take care of themselves and be at the helm of their own health and health outcomes.
Mm. So, what do you all think about that? I mean, is anyone making that case, Representative Crockett? I mean, because the conservatives come at black women and say you are having more abortions than anyone else. But when you're trying to get birth control, when you're trying to do everything you can to get educated about your body, they're standing in the way.
Yeah, these are all great points, and to really bring it home as it relates to Texas, Texas leads in the number of uninsured people. Period. We have over 5 million people that are uninsured, and we live in a state that refuses to expand access to health care through Medicaid. In addition to that, Texas also leads in maternal mortality, especially when it comes to Black women. So one of the big points that I've attempted to make over and over is that abortion care is health care. The people that don't understand that, honestly, there are more risks to a woman's life for those pro-lifers in them actually carrying. And so to force a woman to carry without giving her access to the basics to be able to carry, number one, you're not only risking that woman's life, but that fetus may not ever develop in a way that fetus needs to develop to actually be a healthily born child. And so, they don't want to talk about that part of the conversation, or the part of the conversation where Texas only covered a woman for 2 months past her pregnancy on Medicaid. And so we had a bill this session to expand that care to 12 months. The Texas Senate decided that was way too much. And so the only way that they would sign off on the bill would be if they only expanded it another 4 months to be for a total of 6 months. So this idea that we are so pro-life, but we don't take care of the lives that are actually breathing in that time, right? Such as the mothers, or the fact that they want to be so inflexible as to believe that so long as a fetus is implanted in some way, that is the best thing. It may not be a safe environment for that fetus, and the state of Texas is not doing anything to make it any better. And let's be honest, they're not going to get rid of abortions. They're just going to make it more difficult, and they're going to make it more dangerous. We know that we've seen these unlicensed persons pop up for the purpose of, say, doing butt injections that women have sought out. And that was for the purpose of enhancing their bodies in a cosmetic way. What do you think women will do under these circumstances? Do you think that women that can't afford to, say, cross the border won't go to whatever bootleg doctor pops up around the corner because she is desperate and needs help? And the state of Texas isn't providing any.
Unbelievable. I mean, Commissioner Ellis, can you do anything on the county level?
No, we really can't. I mean, our hands are totally tied. And as the representative was saying, part of the challenge is even if you got something passed through the legislature to get relief, which won't happen, in the federal courts, even if you pass them on the federal level, in the federal courts, if you go to that Fifth Circuit, it'll probably get struck down. That goes to the issue of the other side controlling the United States Supreme Court. So look, it's kind of midnight in America now. This is a challenging phase that we're going to have to get through, and it will be very difficult, no question about it. I assume there'll be copycat laws to this restriction on a woman's right to choose in Texas and other states. Any other state where Republicans control the House, the State Senate, the governor's mansion, it'll pop up everywhere. And at some point, it gets to the Supreme Court. And it's a novel way, creative, slick, underhanded way to get around it being a state action by empowering essentially vigilantes. So you have people snitching on one another and will get paid and get a fee for it, and then get their legal fees back.
Who
It's
will
pretty
pay them?
ridiculous.
Who will pay them?
State,
How's
state, the state will. The state will.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Jasmine, am I right? Representative Crockett, under the bill?
No. Under the bill, they are able to sue anybody, and whoever the defendant is actually pays. So they are really encouraging them to sue providers and sue hospitals, because that would be the big pockets or the deep pockets. That's why we had a lot of conversation about Uber drivers and Lyft drivers potentially being able to be sued as well, because yet again, that would be yet another deep pocket option. They can sue anyone except for the woman. And that was them attempting to make it seem as if this is not a direct attack on a woman's right. So they can sue anybody they want to sue that had anything to do with the abortion.
And Representative, is it unlikely they'd win, but who take the risk? Most providers will take the risk.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, what people don't understand, it's stupid. They did what they wanted to do, which is why I think the DOJ lawsuit is really important. They wanted to put a chill on it. They wanted to basically limit access, and that's what they've done. We've had the majority of the clinics that we had left already go ahead and shut down. There are so many levels to why this law is stupid. Number one, we need a judge to ascertain, can the legislature really decide that they are going to write in standing in this way? These people don't have standing. You normally have to be an injured party, number one. Right. Number two, you have to prove up what injuries or damages it was that you suffered. And number three, I don't know how you actually prove these cases, because normally if you're in a car wreck, which is the example I like to use because it's the one that most people can relate to, if you're saying, hey, you hit me, you injured me, then normally the plaintiff does a waiver as relates to HIPAA, and they release their medical records because that is their proof. Well, now you're talking about the plaintiff somehow being able to gain access to medical information that is protected by federal law. They cannot do that. So it puts the doctors in a catch-22 for sure, because if I'm a plaintiff lawyer, I'm thinking, well, let me just send over a motion for discovery. We need the medical records. How else can you prove, number one, that an abortion occurred, and number two, that abortion occurred and it was either within the 6 weeks or it was outside the 6 weeks, right? You've got to have access to a woman's medical records. When on God's green earth has it been okay for a random stranger to then gain access to someone's medical information? But that is required for you to prove your case. So, I don't see.
So that means you wouldn't win it in court. If you would not win it in court, but it has a chilling impact on any provider. They just wouldn't take the risk.
Absolutely. And on top of that, okay, so I sue you. Normally, if you sue someone and you lose, you can go after them for attorney fees because you have disrupted my life. I had to obtain an attorney. This law says that the defendant cannot recover attorney fees even if they're successful.
And I think I read there's no exception for rape, incest, or fetal anomaly. So it is extremely draconian.
There are no exceptions. They like to say there's an exception for emergencies. That's not an exception. I mean, obviously you have situations where a woman may get pregnant and, the fetus be in her fallopian tubes, right? I guess she's going to have to wait until her fallopian tubes are about to burst before she can get an abortion. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous thing because they failed to consult science. Surprise, surprise, right? Republicans not wanting to listen to, say, a healthcare provider of any sort. And so, we have so many complications when it comes to pregnancies in general that it really doesn't make sense that even if you were looking to do something because you really had pure intentions, that you would be so inflexible because when you look at a pregnancies can go a gazillion different ways. And so you can't have a law that is completely inflexible, not to mention that it's just a complete intrusion on a woman's rights. I don't think that a woman should have to say, I've been raped before they should be allowed to make a decision about their body, regardless as to whether or not there's an exclusion or not. I don't think that any victim should be forced to come out and do that. We know that there's always an underreporting of rape in general. Mm-hmm. And so this idea that we are going to victimize victims over and over, or that we are going to crush a young girl's dreams because, say, nothing is perfect and her birth control failed, right? Like, I mean, there's just so many scenarios that really just don't make sense for this law.
Well, I mean, it is. Jonathan Jackson said it. We've gone back to the Civil War and to the politics and to the practices and the culture of that time. Something for us to think about. And certainly, if you are pro-life, then provide life options for people once they find out they're pregnant.
You know, I like that. That's a good. I remember that. You have the skill, those phrases the way your daddy does it, Santita. I love that.
Well, thank you. And my mama. But but really,
that's right, both.
But no, but really, and thank you for that. But think about that. I mean, because in other countries they deliver a packet of Pampers and formula and food for the mother and the child. I mean, there is a culture of life in other places. We don't have that here. We don't have, we fight over Head Start and pre-K and sending people to college and making sure that public education and vocational education, whether it's academic or vocational, whether it works for people, we don't have a life affirming culture. We don't. So I think there's some bigger questions we need to answer right now. I mean, Dr. Deb, while we are looking to vaccinate people, we need to be looking at universal single payer for everybody, Medicare for all. Just stop it. A lot of this would be eliminated if people had access to equal high quality health care. We don't have it. So think about that, everybody. I'm going to get some closing thoughts from this magnificent panel on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Please push your support. Rainbowpush.org. Rainbowpush.org. Why don't you give us about 30 seconds of why people need to support Push, Reverend Dr. Yeary?
It's simple. The issues matter. As we've talked about for the last several minutes, voting rights, women's productive rights, human rights are at the core. Your rights are hanging in the balance. And so if you want to make sure you've got protection, you need somebody to fight for your rights. And that's why you need to join Rainbow Push today. Rainbowpush.org is where you can do it.
And you can watch our international forum every Saturday at 10 o'clock Central Standard Time on the Impact Television Network or rainbowpush.org or on the Rainbow Push Facebook page of Reverend Jesse Jackson's Push, Reverend Jesse Jackson's personal page. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's get involved. And NAACP might be your thing. National Action Network, get involved. Do some good thing, not just something, some good thing. Do that. Closing thoughts on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
Every nation, they're their way to the West Nation.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get some, I think everybody will get about a minute apiece.
Thank you. I'm so glad your parents are doing well. If your mom taking calls, can I call them?
Yeah, you can call her. Absolutely, call her. I knew she had turned a corner when her voice came back. Because it's your breath support. And when I heard,
does she have a taste and smell?
She does. That's a blessing. And she's now up and down the stairs.
And I'm so glad. Of course, y'all gave him that phone back. He's calling. I talked to him yesterday and the day before yesterday.
You know what?
He needs to rest, man.
He is not even thinking about us with that. He would have been on this morning, but his therapy runs in the middle of the show. And so he was like, well, I can wait. I said, no, you can't. These people have other people to
I'm glad you pushed him to go do that, because I assume all of that time being in bed created challenges for him. He was telling me that.
Well, that and I know what he won't say is that all this running around he's been doing, which I appreciate, it took away from his time with therapy, which that has to be first. That has to be first. And I know that's something that he does not, he kind of starts changing subjects on me, but I do have his DNA, so I lassoed him right back in. I said, stop it, Dad.
That's important because he was on the road. He was there with Representative Crockett and the Texas folks. I think he made it up there twice.
Loving it and loving being
Yeah.
on the road. And I'm like, no, and you can see the impact. And so he just has to, he can do these things. He just has to do them a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just, that's all there is to it. And you know, it's a challenge because when you have lived your life with your body at your command, as you know, really as a top athlete and all of that, you know, many of you might not know on Facebook Live that our father was recruited by the Chicago White Sox before he played Big Ten football at the University of Illinois. So he's always been quite the athlete. And so to have physical challenges, to have challenges with mobility, to have challenges with speech, all these things that God's gifts to him that he's just been able to roll out of bed talking, and his mind is still.
Did he go to college on athletic scholarship?
Straight through. You know, Big Ten football at the University of Illinois. Then he transferred over to North Carolina A&T, where he was their quarterback. You know, so he was on academic and athletic scholarships, but athletics was his way out. Like, you know, for so many people. And so, you know, this is.
And you're right. That mind is as sharp as it was when he was 25.
Oh yeah, it's a steel trap. There's no question about it.
Hey, what a photographic memory! He must have 80% recall.
He does, and he'll tell you on the page. It's 2/3 of the way down. No, it's not a full paragraph. Boom, 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 and you go right there.
Well, we're just grateful he has shared his gift.
Yes, God is good, and you have been a dear friend, brother, beloved. You all have shared so much down through the years, and he even got you a wife. How about that?
Yeah, he sure did.
What you say? Oh wow.
Well, when he gets home, I'm gonna come over to Chicago because he needs to slow down on travel. So more of us need to just come in, and he can still do his Zooms. So he was on the road so much.
Look, let me tell you something. That's what he wants to do. Boomity boom. And I don't even know what else to tell you. Hold on one second. We're coming back on, and everyone, we're going to have 30 seconds for you, Dr. Deb, 30 seconds for you. I'm going to let you. What a wonderful day. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Thank you for being with us today. Commissioner Rodney Ellis, your thoughts.
I'm just so honored to be here. And look, we can't give up. I know it's tough. I'm so proud of what those Texas legislators did. Jasmine, I can feel the frustration. But you all put this issue of voter suppression back on the front burner. And I don't know how it's going to turn out, but we're all indebted to you. We appreciate you. Keep hope alive.
Amen. Dr. Deborah Verholden, moving forward.
Yeah, I just hope people remember this when it's time to vote because, you know, we let legislators do things that aren't in the interest of people, that don't serve people. So I really hope people have a real reckoning with the choices that they've already made and with the choices that they'll have coming up in the future. Amen. You know, we shouldn't be legislating our babies' reproductive rights, and legislators need to stay out of women's uteruses.
How about that? And you know what? And when you don't vote, remember you made a choice as well. We have got Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine for 100. You're just an absolute gem. Your closing thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just want people to stay vigilant. We need to stop being so reactionary. We need to be on top of the next battle. And the next battle that we have while we're still fighting voter suppression, while we're still fighting for women's reproductive rights, our next battle is redistricting. And honestly, we're already behind. So you need to be engaged. You need to go out and proactively figure out when are these hearings going on. You need to testify. You need to not only testify, but to go and grab some friends, some family, tell them the importance, and make sure that y'all don't get amnesia by the time it is for us to vote. You need to make sure that you get up and you vote the opposite of whatever got us into this mess.
And we are in a mess. Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Executive Vice President of Rainbow Push. Your closing thoughts?
Well, we got to get in the fight. That's the thing. The issue is that they're making decisions for us in our place and giving folks rights to oppress us, and we're not saying anything about it. So help Representative Crockett out. Call her, support her, be there for her bill here. Help her draft the bills to make sure that when they come up in committee and they get a public record, the public is standing with her. We have to do that all across the country to make sure that those who are fighting for us are also winning on our behalf.
Amen to that. Hope you will join us on the Rainbow Push International Forum every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on rainbowpush.org and on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page and the Rainbow Push page on Facebook. Please become a member of Rainbow Push. Go to rainbowpush.org and join the fight. Hope you'll join me every weekday morning from 6 to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time on Chicago's Progressive Talk, the largest progressive talk radio station in the nation, and AM 950 Radio. Until next week, may God bless you, everybody. And remember, keep hope alive.
Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit.
I love you all. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Oh, can't wait to have you back.
All right, have a great day.
Oh, you too. God bless you, everybody. Dr. Deb and Reverend Dr. Urey, thank you so much for everything. Dr. Deb, thank you.